Welcome back to the Spruce Stomper YouTube channel, friends. An episode of A Thought with Scott. As Kevin O'Leary once said, the government of any kind makes a terrible business partner. We try a new spot in the shop here. I'm sitting in front of my wall of tri-cut ultra smooth wood owl auger bits. And just before we get into my thought here, what would give you the fizz? What's more sassy than a 5-star made in Sweden Arvika axe? Look at this gorgeous unit. I'll tell you what, 4.5 pounds, made in Sweden, and this particular model with the rough grip handle. You heard me right, gentlemen. The rough grip handle for when the lumberjacking gets deadly serious and you need a good grip. So I would never ever sign up for a business partner that I didn't get a vote on, but I unknowingly did just that. A business partner by the name of Canada Post. Well, there was no handshake, there was no paperwork, and lo and behold, they let me down. Canada Post, if you're not familiar with your friends north of the border here, our postal service. Canada Post, just like your United States Postal Service, but covering a little bit smaller territory and apparently offering exactly zero service at the moment. Ground to a halt. I believe it said some 55,000 workers strike. And of course, a list of demands. Better pay, better conditions, better, this, that, and 5 other things. Well, the mantra that caught my attention is the statements from Canada Post, from their union representatives, and just folks in general, that they are on the side of the average Canadian. They don't want to do this, and they don't want to hurt small business. But what can you do? What can you do? And everyone looks uphill like this. Come on, Mr. Government. Meet our demands and don't make the poor common folk of Canada suffer. Your spruce stomper entrepreneur who depended on the service of the Postal Service to ship products and goods to folks not just in this country, but to the United States and abroad. We use Canada Post because the rates were reasonable, it was convenient, and the service that we received was exceptional. And I'm not speaking as I go on about this strike to the folks that are at our local post office or our regional post office or the folks that deliver my mail. I've met all of these people and they are salt of the earth. They're hardworking folks just like you and me. But as a collective group, and I'm speaking from a point of experience that I can only get from the period of time that I have been involved in a workforce. So as you might tell by my beautiful mustache and my finely aged facial features, I'm not as old as some. I've never worked for a union. I have never actually in my life been in a positive environment where a union was involved. Let me give you a little background on that. So if you've watched the channel for a while, you know that I was involved in heavy industry before becoming self-employed, getting into the construction trades and now into the tool business. My exposure to unions were solely in big establishments, which, I mean, it doesn't get much more unionized and regulated than I'd say the Canada Post system. I mean, you're talking federal government employees. I'd say that, I mean, it doesn't get much more unionized than that, to my knowledge. My exposure was with industry where the unions were big, and I know at the time they served a purpose because the rights of workers and the conditions that folks worked in developed, that not all these conditions were, say, top shelf. So I do understand the point and how the unions came to be. Do I feel that they still hold that direction? I'm not so sure. Times are tough for everybody, and there has never been a replacement. Well, as some of the car folks have watched, there's never been a replacement for displacement. And that doesn't just apply to recreational vehicle, but it applies to life, I think. I mean, if the going gets tough, the tough get going. All this stuff sounds cliche, but what it brings me back to is my unofficial business partner in Canada Post. The going got tough, so they quit. So what does this do exactly? Well, I talk to a lot of small business owners. In fact, my whole customer base in everything that I do involves like-minded entrepreneurs like myself, folks that are determined to cut out a niche for themselves, work for themselves, provide for their family, and provide security based on their own accord. So what have they said? Well, the same thing that I'm saying. You fool me once, but you don't fool me twice. I can appreciate that there are folks within that 55,000 people that are not on the job, are genuinely having a very difficult time. You don't have to look far right now to find families that are having difficulty making ends meet. Does that mean I agree with what's going on? I don't think so. Canada Post as an entity from 2018 forward has lost $3 billion. To put that in perspective, for folks that aren't familiar with how the Postal Service works, they are federally regulated. So as far as a business goes, you don't want to be partners with the government because they kind of will dictate to you what you can and can't do, and maybe you don't like the direction that takes you as an entrepreneur. But if the government owns the business, in the case of the Canada Post system, you essentially have a monopoly on the market. Your only competition is the free market, which you have a hand in regulating. So how do you find yourself on the wrong side of profit? Well, it's inefficiency. It has to be. If you took a business opportunity to any entrepreneur that had been successful in the past and said, look at what we're going to do here for you, Johnny. We are going to give you this opportunity. And you go, okay. You have a full infrastructure. We've got everything. We've got the buildings. We own the real estate. We have the carriers. We have the routes. We, in fact, reach folks that have addresses that only you can deliver to. In our case, the Canadian Post Office box. P.O. boxes can only be delivered to by Canada Post in most instances. If you're familiar with Purolator or FedEx or UPS, a lot of these carriers cannot deliver to a P.O. box. So there you go, captive market. Captive market, the infrastructure, the demand, of course, the demand, are you kidding me? The timing of this strike isn't just interesting. I think it's obvious. As we approach the Christmas season and more shopping is done online, I know a lot of our business is done online, even though I absolutely cherish the opportunity to talk with and meet real people. The demand for shipping is ever increasing. So how can you lose $3 billion? I want to point out something that makes this seem even more odd. Canada Post, which is owned and operated by our federal government, also owns 91% stake in the carrier Purolator. A lot of folks are familiar with Purolator, and I mean, they do the exact same thing. Box from point A to point B, shipping and moving product around for the good folks and Canadians in this country. How do you own Canada Post, and then also Canada Post owns a 91% stake in Purolator, and the kicker, they compete with each other. It'd be like if I opened another construction company right next door. I ran one out of my shop, and then I decided to open one out of my garage, both owned by me, but I'm going to bid against myself and just pretend that I don't know. Now, I'm probably oversimplifying things here because I'm just a common folk and my worldly view and knowledge is, thin. But doesn't that seem funny? If I can go on to an online portal, log in, provide my credit card information to both Canada Post and to Purolator, and they come back with rates for a box that weighs 5 pounds and it's 8 by 8 by 8, and it's going to some real nice folks out on the East Coast in a small town in Nova Scotia. One rate is different from the other rate. Well, I don't think you need to have much more of a sales meeting than to say, we're losing $3 billion whilst we're competing with ourselves and we're providing two different rates? Well, the free market is just going to eat you alive. So here's what's happened. And if you feel I'm off track, that's what the comment section is for. I don't want to be in business with somebody that I didn't get a vote in. So like any responsible business owner, we looked to see our options and we took our business elsewhere. And then all it took was a little bit of discussion, a little word of mouth. Another group of entrepreneurial, like-minded young fellas said, hey, have you heard of such and such a service? I said, no. Look into it. It took, folks, all of about 10 minutes for me to look into it, make a phone call, talk to a real person, and they go, oh yeah, we can provide this service. And not just this service, but expose me now to upwards of 10 carriers at a time that have not only exceeded, beat the rates of Canada Post, provided exceptional service, but I don't have to take anything to the post office anymore. They come and get it with no additional charge and lower rates. I don't want to move away. I love to go to the post office. My kids walk in, we know the people, we carry the packages in, but what choice do you have left? This is what happens now when people want more, and the tact is we're gonna get more, and we're shutting this down. 3 billion probably creeps up to 4 billion to 5 to when the service doesn't exist anymore. I don't see how it continues. I don't see how it continues. How does a crew on a ship that has a hole in it turn on the captain and say mutiny? We're in the middle of the ocean, fellas. The boat's already got a giant hole in it. $3 billion worth of hole. It's sinking. And you've now decided that 11.5% wage increases over 4 years, I could be incorrect on that, I only read what I read, isn't enough. 10 sick days. 10 sick days and 7 personal days a year. 17 personal and health-related days to take off for a unionized employee. That's an increase of 4 over what they already get. It's my understanding. 13 days a year off. And let's face it, in most jobs in this day and age, a medical day and a personal day, they might as well be a wash because nobody can ask you exactly what you were doing anyways because, well, it's none of your business and privacy is everything, and on goes the laundry list. I'm not saying people don't need this time, and it's very easy to get on a high horse and say entrepreneur versus employee, and it's not the same thing. And I do mean this from the bottom of my heart. Folks, a single parent that's working hard every day, 5 days a week. Postal carrier is a full-time job, and that's part of their concern. The Postal Service is suggesting that they move to 7-day-a-week parcel delivery service because they're not competing with the open market, and they're not. We've proven that just this week. And I mean, my business is nothing. My business is literally nothing to Canada Post because, so we ship a few boxes. But if I can figure it out, then everybody figures it out, and they are figuring it out. I've had clients just in the past couple weeks catch wind of the threat of strike and specifically ask me, do not ship with Canada Post because They don't want their stuff stuck. And very thankfully, I'm grateful for this. One parcel we got snagged with. One. And I don't know that it didn't make it yet. It could be sitting at the local post office. And a lot of local post offices are run out of privately owned establishments. They have a storefront there. In our case, a hardware store that houses a Canada Post, how would you say, depot, kiosk. We love those ladies there. That they'll probably give that gentleman his package because they're not part of the union employees that are on strike. One package. Pretty good. But now, I must branch out. And it's not without struggles. You can't ship to a P.O. box. We'll find a way around it. You think somebody won't figure that out? You know, it's just a matter of time. You can't, not every job is going to provide a lifestyle that people think that they deserve. But you can't have this and only be willing to do this. It don't close the gap. And I have been involved firsthand, I'm going to leave you with this. It's the people that make the difference. Because out of 55,000 people, it's not even half. It's probably not even a third. It's probably not even a quarter. It's just a small group of people that drive this idea that it's not enough. There's probably a lot of guys that are close to their retirement. They love being a mail carrier. They say, just leave me alone. They have a voice too. I don't know. I'm mostly just I'm just a little perturbed that it's interrupted my day-to-day. How selfish. I was involved in a business that had a union side to it that represented, I want to say at the time, probably about 400 guys. And it was split into two demographics, two sets of roles. Shop guys, field guys. Well, guess how many guys were in the shop? I believe at the time, 6. Okay? 400 guys, 6 of them in the shop. You want to know where the union steward resided? The guy that was in charge of negotiations on behalf of all 400 guys? He was a shop guy. Out of the 6, he was the guy. So negotiations come around, and it was staggering how quickly folks will turn on each other in this kind of situation and shine a light on whose idea it really was to try and get what they're going to get. I was there purely in a representation role. I don't know how it works with every union, but there's always there's a union rep from the union itself, independent. There's the union steward from the company, in this case the shop gentleman. Nice guy, nothing against him, got on just fine. There's an HR rep, and then there was I don't know what they called me, a stooge, I guess, a place filler. I had to be there, and I had to work with these guys, but it became very apparent that I wasn't there to say anything. Negotiations were short and sweet, and I'm going to wrap this up with my point. The one guy that represented the 6, he was looking out for himself. The other 5 guys, not too concerned. They had a good job. It paid well. They were happy, and their opinion was if it didn't pay enough, they had the skill set, they will find something else. The other group of fellas, the 394 guys, or whatever I'm remembering, they got 0 say. And then that room, in the course of those negotiations, I watched those gentlemen give up a lot for the betterment of profits, and a few guys gain marginal. Very marginal gain. It'd be like the equivalent of the folks at Canada Post gaining 2 or 3 sick days a year. Probably not going to make or break your life. So it was the will of a few that overpowered the many, and the outcome was disruption. No, nobody was happy. I don't think. That was my opinion. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. So, I mean, good luck, but I mean, it's not a place, I mean, never, I don't think there's been one example in the history of the country where you're like, man, hot dang, it's a good thing that instead of just letting this go to free market, having people compete with each other to prosper and actually create jobs, let's get the government involved and let them take over it and see how that goes. Well, $3 billion in the hole is how it's going. So good luck to those folks. I mean, I hope they get what they're after. I really hope, for most people's sake, that it resumes normal service before the Christmas season. I mean, people want to send, you want to send some cookies and a Christmas card to your auntie in Alberta, and she wants to send something back to her folks in Quebec or whatever the case might be. Well, I hope they can do that. But there's other services to get it done. It's not that difficult. I mean, we're all walking around with a smartphone in our hands. I mean, the computing power, you don't have to be a real wizard to figure this stuff out, and money don't lie. We run a tight ship here. I try to get the best rates for our clients to keep it down, and well, we found somebody that's doing that for us so far. So that's my thought on that. I don't think that you can bleed something that has already bled to death. Let me know in the comments your opinion. But appreciate you watching. In the next video, let's do something a little more fun. We'll build something perhaps. Take care.